Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're opening up a really big one. It sits right where massive tech infrastructure meets, well, modern geopolitics.
Exactly. We're talking about the kind of complex custom tech that powers the deep operations of governments.
Yeah, specifically, we've dug into sources detailing this high-stakes tech partnership. We're looking at Microsoft's Azure Cloud, its AI services, and how they were tailored for and used by an Israeli military intelligence unit.
And the scale here is it's huge. We're talking data collection, processing, things that really used to be science fiction.
So our mission today is really to put a technical lens on this.
Hmm.
We need to understand the actual infrastructure, get a handle on the, frankly, overwhelming amount of data involved, and then, crucially, look at the corporate response.
Because Microsoft has its own rules, right?
Yes.
Ethical guidelines about mass surveillance.
Exactly. And this story is about what happens when those guidelines seem to clash with how the technology is actually being used by a state actor. It's not just a policy thing. It's about corporate tools becoming, well, essential tools of state power.
It's critical, because of the computing power, the AI, the data centers. Increasingly, these foundations for intelligence work are owned by just a few private tech companies.
Which means their terms of service suddenly have these massive geopolitical ripples. Big time.
Okay, let's unpack this. So let's start at the beginning. The relationship itself, the user. Sources point to Israel's elite military intelligence branch, Unit 8200.
Right, and they apparently started using Microsoft Azure Cloud Services around 2022. We're talking heavy data processing, massive storage needs.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Unit 8200, it's often compared to the NSA in the U.S., isn't it?
It is. Highly advanced technical capabilities, cyber expertise, they're known globally for it. So they weren't just any customer walking in the door. They had very specific, very demanding needs.
And the sources say the support went right to the top. This wasn't just like buying some server space off the rack.
Oh, definitely not. Far from it. Apparently back in 2021, so before things really kicked off, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella actually met personally with the commander of Unit 8200, the CEO himself. Wow.
Yeah. And the meeting was specifically about supporting a customized Azure environment, tailored precisely for their intelligence requirements.
Okay, if the CEO is involved, that really signals something. It suggests the technical setup, maybe even the sensitivities around it, were pretty significant. Microsoft wasn't just a vendor here.
That's the key thing, yeah. The technical collaboration was apparently quite deep. Microsoft engineers were involved, and interestingly, some sources suggest former Unit 8200 members were among them.
Working together to build this, what do the sources call it, a segregated cloud?
A segregated cloud infrastructure.
Segregated cloud. We hear that term. What does that mean in this context? Why was that so important for a military unit?
Well, segregated basically means they built a kind of private fortress within Microsoft's larger system, walled off, not just for standard security, but really to ensure only their specific hardware, their specialized AI tools, could access that huge pool of data.
So extra security, but maybe also less visibility for Microsoft, I mean.
It likely provided an extra layer of operational security, yeah. And potentially, it could bypass some standard corporate oversight or audit trails designed for regular commercial data. The main goal was secure, high-speed, large-scale data transfer, and smooth AI integration, built specifically for intelligence work.
Okay, so they didn't just rent space. They co-designed this fortified engine room. Which brings us to, well, the sheer scale of what that engine was processing. Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's just pause for a second and try to grasp the volume of data we're talking about. It's kind of mind-boggling.
It really is. The documents we looked at indicate the system piled up about 11.5 thousand terabytes of stored data, just sitting there on Microsoft's cloud infrastructure.
11,500 terabytes. Can you put that in perspective? Like, what does that even mean?
Well, one way to think about it is audio. That amount of data is roughly equivalent to something like 200 million hours of audio recording.
200 million hours
Yes.
of intercepted communications, presumably. That's industrial surveillance defined, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the system was built to handle that kind of flow. During intense periods, the capacity reportedly hit a peak of processing 1 million calls per hour.
1 million calls an hour.
Yeah, intercepted calls coming in. And this massive stream, this processing, it wasn't just happening in one place. It was spread across 3 different Microsoft data centers.
3? Where are they?
Facilities in the Netherlands, one in Ireland, and one in Israel.
Okay, Israel makes sense, obviously.
Yeah.
But why the Netherlands and Ireland? What does that global spread tell us?
Well, using geographically diverse centers like that Netherlands, Ireland, Israel that points to a strategic setup, it gives you redundancy, first off. If one site has issues, the others can compensate.
Right, backup.
Exactly. But maybe more importantly, it provides high-speed, low-latency processing across different regions, different regulatory environments, which can be really crucial if you're trying to aggregate communications data globally. Azure wasn't just storage, it was this distributed global brain, near limitless capacity.
Okay, so the infrastructure is the foundation, the storage, the processing power. But like you said, 11.5 thousand terabytes. Humans can't sift through that manually. That's where the AI comes in, right? That's the game changer.
That's absolutely right. The core function wasn't just storing data, it was analyzing it. AI tools were apparently doing real-time transcription, translation, and pretty comprehensive analysis on calls, text messages, across multiple languages, all happening at once.
Let's dig into that AI a bit. The sources mention risk scoring, 1 million calls an hour.
Sure.
How does risk scoring work at that scale? Is it just like keyword spotting or more complex?
It seems to be much more sophisticated than just keywords. This is really the difference between older surveillance methods and modern AI-driven intelligence. You shift from trying to target collection carefully to just vacuuming up everything indiscriminately.
Hoovering it all up.
Pretty much. And then the AI sorts through the mountain of data. These risk scoring systems reportedly used advanced NLP natural language processing. So they're looking not just for words, but for patterns, sentiment, maybe even trying to infer intent or relationships between speakers.
And assigning a threat score almost instantly.
That seems to be the idea, telling the analyst, hey, look here first.
So the AI isn't just writing down what was said, it's prioritizing, maybe even predicting, pointing intelligence officers towards the most quote-unquote interesting stuff within those 200 million hours of audio.
Precisely. It shifts passive listening to predictive prioritization. That's the power.
Okay, so what was the point? How was this highly processed, AI-prioritized data actually used? What did UNet 8200 do with it in the real world?
Well, reports indicate intelligence officers use this analyzed data quite directly for planning military operations, things like coordinated airstrikes, making tactical decisions on the ground.
And beyond immediate military actions.
Yes, the stored data was also reportedly used for broader intelligence gathering leading to civilian arrests and feeding into military targeting decisions that, sources say, affected non-combatant populations.
Right, and this is where we hit the ethical dilemma, isn't it?
It is. If you connect this to the bigger picture, the core issue highlighted in the source material is this. The capability apparently enabled the indiscriminate collection of communications from millions of civilians without specific warrants, without targeted justification, without that individualized legal oversight.
Which runs right up against the kind of data privacy principles tech companies often talk about.
Exactly, especially Microsoft's own stated policies.
Which brings us to that inevitable clash. You've got this powerful corporate platform enabling activity that seems to conflict directly with its own rules on privacy and human rights. So how did Microsoft react when this all started coming out?
Well, Microsoft does have a pretty clear global policy. It explicitly bans using its platforms for mass surveillance of civilian populations anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter if a government authorized it or not. That's their stated line.
So that policy became the standard they had to measure this against.
It seems so. They were basically forced to address it once it became public.
Okay, let's get the timeline straight. When did the pressure really mount?
Things really heated up in August 2025. That's when media reports started surfacing, detailing these specific surveillance activities and highlighting the reliance on Microsoft services.
And that triggered something internally at Microsoft.
Yes. According to reports, Microsoft launched an immediate, pretty comprehensive investigation, both internal and using external parties.
And what did their investigation find?
They found evidence, apparently, of violations of Microsoft's own terms of service, specifically related to those surveillance operations.
Okay, now here's a potentially tricky part. Microsoft's official line was that they had no prior knowledge that Azure was being used for this kind of large-scale surveillance in this specific way.
Correct, that was their statement.
But given the CEO met the unit commander back in 2021, given they built this custom, segregated environment specifically for high-level intelligence work, did the sources suggest any skepticism about that claim? That they really didn't know the potential use?
The sources definitely highlight that tension. On one hand, Microsoft maintained it was unaware of the specific nature and scale of the surveillance violating its terms. On the other hand, the level of customization, the CEO involvement, It clearly shows Microsoft knew this was being built for very sensitive, high-end military intelligence processing.
So a nuanced picture.
Very. Their official statement holds, claimed no prior knowledge of the violations, stressed they're committed to enforcing their AI code of conduct and terms of service.
Right. But regardless of what they knew when, their response, once the investigation concluded, was pretty decisive.
It was, yes. Microsoft took action. They ceased and disabled the specific Azure subscriptions and AI services linked to the Israeli Ministry of Defense that were found to be in violation.
Pulled the plug.
Effectively, yes. Though they maintained confidentiality protocols, apparently, and didn't publicly name Unit 8200 as the specific unit affected.
Okay, so a major global tech company shuts down key services for sophisticated military intelligence operation. That sounds huge. What was the fallout? Did it actually stop their operations?
Well, this is where it gets really fascinating. The reported response from Israeli officials was surprising. They claimed publicly that there was no operational impact.
No impact. After having their customized Azure environment shut down?
That was the claim. Military capabilities were reportedly unaffected.
How is that possible?
Still.
That suggests they weren't solely reliant on Microsoft, or they had backups ready.
Exactly. Reports indicated they started migrating data immediately, moving that massive 11.5 thousand terabytes to other providers. They were apparently already evaluating alternative cloud platforms to keep things running smoothly.
So Microsoft shuts the door, and they just walk over to the next cloud provider.
It seems that way. And this whole situation really throws a spotlight on the huge challenge tech companies face, doesn't it? Trying to manage ethical use of their own powerful cloud and AI tech, especially in these really sensitive geopolitical situations.
It really demonstrates that sort of whack-a-mole problem. You shut down access here, but the capability, the need, it just potentially moves somewhere else.
And maybe somewhere with less public scrutiny or perhaps different terms of service. That's the bigger takeaway, isn't it? The tools, the sophistication needed for this kind of intelligence work, it's now available across the board in the hyperscale cloud market.
So restricting one vendor might just be a temporary hurdle, not a fundamental block.
It seems that way, yeah. It shifts the operation, but maybe doesn't stop it.
So what does this all mean when we step back? We've laid out how Microsoft's tech, its cloud, its AI, provided this incredibly powerful infrastructure, enabling storage and analysis of, 11.5 thousand terabytes?
That's right. Facilitating really sophisticated AI-driven planning.
And then we saw the corporate side. Microsoft stepping in, enforcing its policies, restricting services when violations were found. A significant move.
Definitely sets a precedent for corporate accountability in these areas. But as you said, the reaction from the other side is maybe the most telling part. That claim of no operational impact, the immediate start of data migration.
That really shows where the power dynamic might be shifting, doesn't it? The capability itself seems almost independent of any single company now.
Precisely.
Which leaves us, and you, with a pretty big question to think about. In a world where this kind of cloud computing power is basically ubiquitous, is restricting access by just one provider, even a giant like Microsoft, really a meaningful check on state power anymore?
Or is it just a temporary inconvenience? A bump in the road before the operations, and all that data simply moved to a different platform, maybe one operating more in the shadows?
The question isn't really if these capabilities exist anymore, is it?
No. It's more like, who's ultimately responsible for policing them when the underlying infrastructure is just so flexible, so available everywhere?
Something to chew on. We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.